also with value adding and how 50% of the canola is crushed domestically. So there is huge opportunity, I think, in an open market system with wheat. The questions I have is, first of all, why wasn't Ian White on the task force that the federal government appointed? And the second question is, how closely are you working with the federal government to come up with some kind of a plan to make this transition more transparent and work well for farmers?
Thank you. I think Alan will take that.
Okay, thanks, Greg, for your question. First of all, on the task force that Deputy Minister John Nubley has commissioned, originally we were asked to co-chair that task force. That's something we didn't think was appropriate. Just a little background, this task force is to look at some of the ancillary issues that would be in play with removal of the single desk. Producer cards, advance payments, market development, branding and promotion. So we declined to be the co-chair of that committee. However, we offered back to stand as a permanent resource on that committee, and they said no to that. So in the end, we agreed that we would make submissions. Our criticism of that committee was primarily in composition, in that the people that were most affected were not present at that committee. Farmers were in short supply, no producer car shippers or short line operators on that committee, so that was our concern. But that's the story on the task force. As far as working with the government on a plan, I said earlier that we've done a fair amount of work on calculating what the wind-up cost would be of this organization. And at our last planning session, and some of this work we had done previously, we looked at 8 or 19 different models that right from the current single desk down to a small brokerage agency or dissolution. And we came to the conclusion once again that there's no model out there that delivers anywhere close to the value that the current single desk does. Now, we did also talk about some of the difficulties that a new entity would encounter in the marketplace. And at some point in time, we would be willing to offer that up as advice to government, as suggestions of what would be required. But let's be clear, the responsibility for creating that new entity rests with the federal government. Number one, they are the initiators of the change. Number two, if any financial assistance is to be offered, that's completely within their purview. And number three, if there's any regulations around access to facilities at country or at port, they also have control over that through the drafting of the legislation. And finally, and probably most importantly, as directors, whether elected or appointed, our fiduciary responsibility is to the current organization. And we must always act in this organization's best interests. And as the single desk is the Canadian wheat board's most valuable asset, it's our duty to protect that asset.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Robert Snyder. I farm 12 miles south of Camrose here. And I was a seed grower for over 30 years. As a seed grower, I was able to export my grain without a permit. I could get a permit to export seed grain to the United States at no cost. As a certified organic farmer, I have to pay a buyback. And that's one question I'd like to know what the difference was. The next thing is, I do own a farm in Montana, and in that farm there, I have the opportunity to sell to 3 grain companies, 3 big grain companies, along with 3 co-ops. And when my crop is off, those people come to me, or I can give them samples, and they bid on my grain. And I've always been able to get from $1.50 to $1.85 a bushel more than I could get for my grain in Alberta. I have a friend in Vanderbilt, BC, and he gets when I was getting $3 a bushel, he was getting $5 a bushel because he was not controlled by any wheat, but only the seed credit farmers were controlled. Now, the system in the United States seems to be working. There's no Canadian wheat board there, and I'm wondering why we still have farmers in the United States because they don't have a wheat board to support them.
Just in case people didn't hear the questions, there's two questions. One's about the organic program and the buyback, and then this gentleman talks about a farm that he has in Montana, and that there are still farmers in the United States, and they don't have a Canadian wheat board, and he feels he gets prices, better prices for his grain in Montana than what he's getting here in Canada. No, I think we've had two questions, so that's good.
I will avoid getting into much detail in terms of answering your question on organics. What we try to do with any of these export programs, whether it's certified seed, organic, or conventional grain, is we look at what is the impact going to be on the revenue that everybody else receives. So what's the financial impact on the pool of you exporting a ton of certified seed into the United States or some other market? The impact that we see is none. That the export of certified seed is going to have no impact at all on our ability to sell conventional grain to a flour miller or somebody else in that market. And that's the reason why the producer direct sale fee for a certified seed grower to sell into that market is zero. If you sell conventional grain into that market as an individual, generally what's going to happen is that's going to substitute one for one for a sale by the Canadian Wheat Board into that market. So the impact is significant. And we're talking only a small number of tons here, and so it's a small dollar amount in total. But the impact is one for one on conventional grain. On organic grain, what we've done is we've struck a middle ground there, where there is some substitutability, and this is a judgment call as to what the exact value of that is. In some markets, selling organic grain into that market is going to have just as big an impact as selling conventional grain. In Japan is an example, where if you sell a ton of organic grain into Japan, that is going to substitute one for one for a sale of Canadian grain into that market. And so the organic fixed spread contract fee is fairly significant into Japan. In some other markets, it's not significant, so the fee is very low, and the fee is also stable over the course of the year. So it's a complicated topic. I hope that provides a bit of a summary as to what the answer is.
And to the last part of your question about how do U.S. farmers survive without a Canadian wheat board, very simple answer. They have a U.S. Farm Bill.
Microphone 2.
My name is Darrell Stokes. I farm down southeast of Drumheller. If the government has its way and the single desk is legislated out of the wheat board, the rest of the world is going to look at that and say, you bloody fools, how could you have let your wheat board be destroyed?
Just a little further as to that comment, one of the concerns that I have in regards to the WTO, as you're probably aware, that the Europeans and the Americans have been trying to get rid of state trading enterprises, i.e. the Canadian Wheat Board, for years. If this Canadian Wheat Board is, the single desk is removed on August 1st, 2012, that will be another unilateral concession that Canada has made, and we as farmers will get nothing in return in terms of market access. The same thing happened with the coal when that was given up. So it's a good point that was raised there.
Thank you we'll go back to microphone 1.
Hello, thank you. My name is Terry Bain, and I was introduced earlier as the president of the National Farmers Union. And in that capacity, I get to travel across the country and witness what happens in different parts of the country, particularly to potato producers that are dominated by two companies, the Irvings and the McCains. And what happens to them? They tell how they're going to farm, where they buy their inputs, at what price. And after they put their potatoes in the ground, they tell them, well, you know what, fellas, we have to cut back. We're getting offshore potatoes at a better price, and we're going to negotiate a lower price with you. And also, we're not going to give all of you access to quota. We're not going to tell you who's in and who's out. And pretty soon they've whittled down the farmers to a state of desperation. Now, on the other side, the McCains, the Cargills, the Monsantos of the world, particularly tenaciously protect their patents and anything that gives them market advantage, similar to a single desk, market power. And in Canada, our forefathers recognized that we needed to counterbalance the power of these big players, and we put together the Canadian Wheat Board, the Canadian Grain Commission, the Canada Grains Act. And we have to remember how important those things are. We've labored under for our lives, and many of us don't know what the consequences are. But you talk to a potato producer in New Brunswick who's brave enough to speak up, and you'll find out what the new world will look like when you're dominated by three grain companies.
Do you have a question as well?
I do. I wonder why we would ever contemplate losing our marketing advantage that's designed for farmers and farmers' interests.
Thank you. Cam?
Yeah, basically, I have to admit that I'm baffled as well as to why farmers would want to give up a system that I believe works in their best interest, as Alan has said before. The wheat board does everything it can to keep the costs as low as possible and the profits as high as possible, and returns all of that money to the Canadian farmer. Now, I think most of us, you don't have to be a potato farmer from New Brunswick to have basically had a taste of what it's like to deal with the grain company with a production contract where they want to supply you with the seed and they tell you where to buy the seed. In case of us, where we were growing Navigator Durham, we were north of where Viterra, who had the sort of exclusive contract on that, wanted to have that grown, so we had to go down to Moose Jaw, which for us is a trip of about 100 miles to pick up our seed. We had to haul that seed down there. We were supposed to buy all of our fertilizer and all of our crop inputs from Viterra as well, and they also controlled when we were able to haul that durum into market. Something similar happens with Cargill when you have their specialty oil canola. In years where they grow, their yields are better than they expect, they will not basically give you that specialty oil premium on all of your crop. You only get that premium on a part of it, and they decide what that part of it is after harvest. So, we have already had a taste of that. If farmers want that, that really is what this plebiscite is about. If that's what you want, go to the plebiscite for an open market, and that will be the only choice you have. But like I say, I certainly believe that to give something like that up, the single desk and the power it gives farmers, I guess I don't see any sense in it, if you will.
We have quite a few people at the microphones, which is great. And once the people at the microphones are finished, and if there's a couple of other questions, and then I think we will go into closing remarks. But again, I do remind you that all of the directors and Gord and other staff from the Canadian Wheat Board will be here once we adjourn and are quite happy to continue the conversation. Microphone 2.
Okay, George Calvin, New Norway, Alberta. Over the last few years, the board of directors have made various marketing changes with a view toward accommodating the wishes of various groups of people. And I'm not opposed to that. I think that's the Christian way to do things. However, they can do that and still retain the single desk aspect, which is required by the majority of farmers. And I would like to ask, perhaps Alan could answer,